I never believed in absolute damnation. Even after years of working in the Vatican's archives, surrounded by apocalyptic texts and centuries-old warnings, I thought most of it was symbolic, metaphors for sin, human corruption, spiritual decay. But that was before I opened the drawer no one was supposed to touch. It was an unremarkable drawer in an unremarkable cabinet. The kind you'd walk past without a second glance. No gold trim, no blessed seals, just a brass handle worn smooth by time. Yet it was locked with a mechanism unlike anything I had ever seen. Not a keyhole, a small circle of black obsidian, cold to the touch, and engraved with a spiral that seemed to move when you stared too long. I should have walked away. Instead, I pressed my palm against it. The metal beneath my hand warmed instantly, and I felt something pulse, as if the cabinet itself had a heartbeat. With a sharp click, the lock opened. Inside was a single rolled parchment tied with black silk. No dust, no mold, as though it had been placed there yesterday. When I pulled the ribbon free and unrolled it, my breath caught in my throat. It was a list, a perfectly written, immaculate list in deep red ink that shimmered faintly under the flickering candlelight. Each line was numbered, followed by a name, a date, and a symbol I didn't recognize. The handwriting was unervingly precise, like it had been carved into the page rather than written. I skimmed the first few entries. 1. Andrea Bellucci, June 14th, 2025, 8-pointed star. 2. Thomas Weller, September 3rd, 2025, 8-pointed star. 3. Father Carlo Mendez, October 10th, 2025, 8-pointed star. My stomach tightened. Every name had a date, and all the dates were in the near future. When I reached the 6th entry, my blood froze. 6. Elias Marlowe, March 28th, 2026, 8-pointed star. Elias Marlowe. My name, my exact spelling, my exact birth date written faintly beside it in smaller text, like a signature of inevitability. The ink seemed to ripple when I touched it, and the candlelight dimmed as though the parchment was drawing it in. My name was not just written, it was etched into something deeper than paper. At the bottom of the scroll, in smaller script, was a chilling phrase in Latin. Mil anime damnati, ordo irrevocabilis. 1,000 damned souls, the irreversible order. I heard movement behind me, a slow scrape, like nails dragging across stone. I turned, but the archive aisle was empty. Only the cold draft of air from somewhere deeper in the darkness. I didn't know it then, but finding that list had already set the clock ticking. And for the first time in my life, I realized the Vatican's warnings weren't metaphors. They were death sentences. The list haunted me for the rest of the day. Even as I tried to focus on my assigned work, cataloging medieval papal decrees, repairing brittle scrolls, the parchment seemed to hum in the back of my mind. My name, written in that perfect red script, burned like a brand behind my eyes. By evening, I decided to lock the list back in the drawer. But when I reached the cabinet, the black obsidian lock was gone. In its place was a small, hollow opening, as if the locking mechanism had melted away. The parchment was still there. But now, the black silk ribbon had been tied again, tighter than before, though I was certain I'd left it loose. I froze. Someone had touched it. That night, the Vatican's archivum was unusually silent. Normally, you could hear distant murmurs of priests in study rooms, the faint ringing of bells marking the hours. But now, the stillness felt weighted, like the building was holding its breath. Then came the whisper. At first I thought it was the hiss of an old pipe or the rustle of parchment. But no, this was a voice. Low, strained, and speaking in Latin far older than the church itself. I couldn't make out all the words, but I caught fragments. Nomen scriptum, damnatio, non effigies. Name written damnation, you cannot escape. It was coming from the walls. I backed away from the cabinet, my pulse hammering. As I did, a section of the marble wall shifted slightly, the way a door frame might move when something presses against it from the other side. I wasn't imagining it. There was breathing behind the wall. I pressed my ear to the cold surface. The voice stopped, replaced by the slow, rhythmic thud of something massive. Not footsteps, heartbeats. Suddenly, a thin crack split across the marble. Not like a normal break, this one bled. Thick, black liquid oozed out, trailing down the wall and pooling near my shoes. It smelled of iron and rot. I staggered back, but before I could run, the liquid began to twist into shapes. Letters. My name, again and again, dripping in black across the floor. Then the wall went still. The heartbeat stopped. The whispers were gone. I was shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone to take a picture. But when I checked the screen, the photo was blank. Just empty marble. That was when I understood the Vatican wasn't just hiding something. It was alive, and whatever was inside had read the list too. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the black letters spilling across the marble, my name repeating like a curse. By morning, I made a decision. I needed to know where the list came from. The Vatican archives are a labyrinth, but they follow a quiet order. Documents are cataloged by category, then by century, then by subject. The drawer where I found the list wasn't part of any known index. That meant one thing. It belonged to the Edificium Obscurum. The Edificium is the church's shadow archive, hidden corridors and sealed rooms that do not exist on official maps. I'd only heard of it from whispers among older archivists, most of whom wouldn't even say the name aloud. They claimed it was where the Vatican kept records too dangerous to destroy, but too cursed to display. Using my clearance card, I navigated through a series of locked gates until I reached a corridor I'd never been assigned to before. The air there was different, thicker, with the faint smell of extinguished candles. At the end of the corridor stood a door unlike any other I'd seen. It was made of iron and covered in carvings. Not Latin, but a language older than Rome. In the center was a symbol I recognized immediately, a circle with 13 smaller circles inside it. I had seen that exact symbol at the bottom of the list. Someone long ago had taken the time to carve the symbol so deeply into the metal that it almost seemed burned in. The lock was unlike anything modern, 3 slots shaped for keys that were not made for human hands. But someone had left it slightly ajar. Inside was a small reading room, dimly lit by oil lamps that should have gone out centuries ago. At the far wall, a single glass case displayed a brittle codex bound in black leather. The label, written in a hand so precise it could have been machine-made, read, Index Damnatorum, the Index of the Damned. The codex was chained to the display table. The pages were filled with names. Thousands upon thousands, each written in that same red script as the list. Some names had dates next to them. Others had symbols, stars, crosses, and one that looked disturbingly like an open eye. As I turned the pages, I found something that stopped my breath. Near the end of the book was a section marked with the 13 circle symbol. The names here were all in the future, and number 6 on the list was mine. The date beside it was only 3 days away. Beneath my name was an annotation in faded ink, Servatus usque ad vocem. I recognized the Latin from my theological studies, preserved until the calling. I didn't know what the calling was, but I knew I didn't want to find out. The night after I found the codex, the walls of my apartment began to whisper. At first, I thought it was just the city air seeping through cracks in the plaster, those hollow sighs you sometimes hear when the wind shifts. But then the whispers began to form words. My name, over and over, always in that same rhythm, like a chant. I turned on every light in the room. The sound did not stop. At exactly 3 a.m., the air temperature dropped sharply, enough for my breath to fog. My phone flickered on its own, the screen glowing with static. In the static, for just a fraction of a second, I saw a pale face with hollow eyes. Its lips were moving, but the sound came from inside my head. 3 days. I grabbed my coat and left the apartment. Wandering the streets of Rome in the dead of night is dangerous, but at that moment, being outside felt safer than staying inside with whatever was in there. The city was unusually quiet. Even the stray cats seemed to have vanished. I passed under the shadow of the Vatican walls and saw something I will never forget. In the upper windows of the Apostolic Palace, where no light should have been, a faint glow pulsed like a heartbeat. In the glow, silhouettes moved, tall, impossibly thin figures with unnaturally long arms. They appeared to be carrying something between them, a bundle wrapped in white cloth. Then one of the figures stopped and looked out the window, directly at me. My chest tightened. I could feel my pulse in my throat, my vision narrowing. For a moment, I thought it would step away. Instead, it raised one elongated finger and placed it where its lips should have been, as if to say silence. The glow in the window died instantly. The city noise returned all at once, almost deafening after the stillness. I stumbled back to my apartment and locked every door and window. When I finally dared to look at my phone, I found a single new notification. It wasn't from any app one owned. It was just a blank black screen with red text. 2 days remaining. That was the first time I truly believed the list was not just an artifact. It was a sentence. Sleep became impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes, burning pages, blackened hands clawing at invisible walls, and a number 6 carved into a slab of wet stone. I decided I had to know who the first 5 names were. The codex listed them clearly, each etched in ink, so deep it looked scorched into the parchment. But the entries had no last names, only initials and strange symbols beside them. I began with name number 1, Luciano V., marked with a crescent moon symbol. After hours of digging through old parish records and news clippings, I found him. He was a priest in Naples who vanished in 1998. Locals said he'd been taken during the Feast of the Assumption, disappearing right in the middle of the congregation. The church sealed the incident as an act of God. Name number 2, Margaret E., marked with a sunburst. She was a nun stationed in Argentina. Her body was found on the steps of a rural chapel in 2003, her skin covered in symbols matching those in the codex. The case was closed in less than a day. Names number 3 and number 4 were harder. Both were marked with a pair of cross keys, Vatican insignia. They were brothers from Warsaw, both altar boys in the same parish. In 2010, their parents woke to find their beds empty. The only clue left behind was a small wax seal pressed into the wood of their nightstands, 2 keys intertwined. But name number 5 stopped me cold. Her name was Dr. Helena Cortese, a historian specializing in religious relics. She was the one who had filed the restricted archive request on the same codex I now possessed. According to reports, she was last seen in the reading room of the Vatican Library in 2019. The next morning, the entire wing of the library was shut down for renovations. She was never seen again. My pulse quickened as I realized something chilling. The gap between disappearances was shrinking. Years, then months, now possibly days. If the pattern held, my turn was almost due. I decided to call an old contact, Father Mancini, a man who once hinted to me about a list that heaven fears. When I told him my name and number, there was a long pause. Then, in a whisper, he said, "You need to burn it. Burn the codex before it calls your keeper." Before I could respond, the line went dead. Not disconnected, dead, as if the very signal had been severed. I stared at the phone in my hand, and for the first time, I wondered if destroying the codex would do anything, or if it would only make the thing hunting me angry. That night, the walls of my apartment began to breathe. I know how that sounds, madness, but I swear the plaster expanded and contracted as if lungs had been built into the foundation. The air felt thick, syrupy, heavy enough that every breath scraped my throat. The codex sat on my desk, unopened, but it hummed. A low, sub-bass vibration that made the glass of water beside it ripple. Then the light bulbs began to flicker. Not the normal kind of flicker. This was rhythmic like a heartbeat. Bottom, bottom, bottom. At exactly the 3rd pulse, my phone buzzed. No number, no caller ID, just a blank screen with the words, "The keeper is outside." I didn't look at the window right away. My hands trembled, my chest tight. When I finally forced myself to glance, I wished I hadn't. A figure stood under the flickering street lamp across the road. Tall, far too tall, its shoulders brushing the lower branches of the sycamore tree. The head was shrouded in what looked like ceremonial cloth, embroidered with the same symbols from the codex. Where its face should have been was only blackness, swallowing the light. It did not move, but the street lamp did. The steel pole bent ever so slightly toward it, like metal bowing to its master. I shut the curtains, backed away, and grabbed the codex, my mind screaming at me to burn it. But before I could, the pages flipped on their own, rifling past my fingers until they stopped at my own entry, number 6. And there, freshly written in glistening black ink, was a date. Tomorrow. I bolted for the kitchen, fumbling for matches. My hands wouldn't work properly. Numb, almost frozen. By the time I lit the first match, a sound came from the hallway outside my apartment door. Click, click, click. Not footsteps. Not exactly. More like the sound of nails tapping wood. Then the knob began to turn. The door didn't creak. It sighed, like the wood itself was relieved to let something in. I gripped the lit match tighter, its flame trembling with my hand. The keeper stepped inside, not walking, but gliding, the fabric of its robe dragging across the floor without sound. The air temperature plummeted so quickly that my breath became a visible cloud. Up close, I saw details I wish I could forget. The ceremonial cloth was stitched not with thread, but with what looked like human hair. The black void where its face should have been rippled, like ink disturbed in water, and every so often, faint shapes moved within it, shapes that felt wrong, like they belonged to creatures that had never known light. It raised one impossibly long hand. Its fingers were jointed too many times, each knuckle bending backward. The hand hovered over the codex. "Your place is prepared," a voice said. It wasn't sound. It was a pressure in my skull, like the thought had been hammered directly into my brain. "I'm not going anywhere," I whispered, but the words sounded absurd even to me. The keeper tilted its head, or at least the cloth did, and it pointed toward my chest. The codex snapped shut, and I felt a sharp heat bloom beneath my sternum. I pulled my shirt down to look, and there it was, my number 6 carved into my skin as if by an invisible blade. Blood welled in the grooves. I stumbled back, clutching at the mark, but my heel hit the wall. There was nowhere to go. Then the keeper reached into the blackness of its own face and pulled something out. A single page. It was older than the codex itself, yellowed and flaking at the edges, with text written in a script that made my eyes ache just looking at it. At the bottom was a seal, a perfect match to the one I had seen stamped on my entry in the codex. It pressed the page into my hands. "This is your path," the voice in my head said. Then, just as silently as it had entered, it was gone. But the page was warm, and in the corner, beneath the seal, was a set of coordinates. I stared at the coordinates for a long time before I dared to move. My heart was still thundering from the encounter, but something deep in me whispered that the keeper hadn't been threatening me. It had been sending me somewhere. I tore the page from my grip and shoved it into my jacket pocket before slipping out of the vault. Every step echoed unnaturally in the corridor, the air pressing against my back as though the keeper's gaze still followed me. The Vatican is a labyrinth above ground, but below, it's something else entirely. Hidden staircases, silent courtyards, frescoes that no tourist will ever see. The coordinates led me through a service passage no wider than my shoulders, until I emerged into a forgotten chapel buried in the bedrock. It was nothing like the ornate sanctuaries above. The walls here were raw stone, damp with centuries-old moisture. The only decoration was a single altar, carved from black marble and covered in dust. In its center sat a sealed glass vessel. Inside, a fragment of parchment curled like a dead leaf. I brushed away the dust and saw the seal. It was identical to the one on my page and in the codex. The 6th seal. The moment my fingers touched the glass, the chapel changed. Candles flared to life in the corners, though I hadn't lit them. The walls trembled, and I heard voices, whispers in dozens of languages, all overlapping, all pleading. The vessel pulsed with a faint, sickly light. I lifted it, and the whispers grew louder. Then the glass shattered in my hands without warning. The parchment inside unfurled midair, glowing brighter and brighter until the light filled the chapel. My number 6 burned away, replaced by a single sentence written in that same impossible script. "The list is not of the dead, but of the ones who choose." Before I could understand, the parchment dissolved into ash and vanished. The candles died instantly. I was alone in darkness again. I ran, through the corridors, up the stone steps, back into the modern world. But as I emerged into the street, I noticed something horrifying. Every person I passed, every single one, had a faint number glowing faintly on their chest. Some single digits, some stretching into the hundreds. And when I caught my reflection in a shop window, I saw that my chest was no longer marked with a number. Instead, there was only a seal. The keeper's seal. I don't know if that means I've escaped the list, or if I become something much worse.